For many, this heat, dust, and isolation remain the perception of agriculture. However, in the 21st century, agriculture is an exciting, high-tech sector that feeds the world.
Hi, welcome, Jacomien. It's really fantastic to have you on our podcast and to have the opportunity to chat to you and to hear about the Citrus Academy and its establishment and its growth and all the plans and where you're planning to go and what you guys are doing. So, yeah, it's a remarkable organization. So over to you. Tell us more about the Citrus Academy.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. Thanks, Dewald. This is a real privilege. Thank you very much for inviting me to be on your podcast today. Yeah, it's been a long road. We established the Citrus Academy at the beginning of 2005. So it has now been almost 19 years that we've been doing what we are doing here, and it is an interesting story because it began really as a spark in the eye of the CGA board, and probably more specifically Justin Chadwick, where at that time the requirement came into being that all statutory levy administrators in agriculture had to spend a certain percentage on transformation in the industry. So the approach that they took was to put in place resources to do enterprise development with emergent growers, so to assist them with the development of their enterprises, and then to look at skills development within the industry, human resource development in the industry. And they established the Citrus Academy. Initially, we were a division of the CGA. So in 2005, I was actually employed to start the academy. So I am really fixtures and fittings by now in the industry. So I started the academy, and at that point, working for the CGA, because the academy was a division within the CGA. And then in 2007, the academy was established as a nonprofit company, a separate entity on its own. And I remember the first day, I'm sure you won't mind me telling the story, but the first day I walked into Justin's office, very keen. It was the 4th of January, 2005. I walked into his office very keen with my little notebook and my pen ready to take notes. And I said to him, okay, so now you've established the academy and this is now all good. What would you like me to do? What are the priorities? What are the objectives? What would you like me? What do we need to focus on? And he said to me, I don't know. You tell me. That's what we appointed you for. So that's very nice. I'll tell you, there's nothing like a clean slate to start with, and that was actually a wonderful thing. That from the start we were in a position to set the agenda and to decide what the best way is. Now, it is quite a challenge, of course. Sometimes ignorance truly is a blessing, because at that point, I came from a background of being involved with growers, emergent growers within the citrus industry. So I had some knowledge and some background of the industry, but much more from the production side, and much more, and then with some skills development and some developmental work along with that. But I had no idea of the scope of the industry, or, well, not a very clear idea, at least, of the scope of the industry, or exactly what would be involved, what the value chain looked like, or how extensive that was. So that's been a very interesting learning curve. And of course, the more I learn, the more the industry changes and develops and gets more sophisticated, and the next thing comes on board, and the next thing comes on board. So never a dull moment. In 18 years, almost 19 years, I can tell you this, there has not been a dull moment yet, except when I'm on holiday. So, it really has been a wonderfully interesting process, and the way that the academy has also grown over that time has been has just been incredible to see. We are extremely lucky to be in the citrus industry. The industry itself is extremely sophisticated and extremely developed in the way that it approaches its business and goes about its business. And the fact that the industry is also distributed right across South Africa means that we are really multicultural, it's not like some of the other industries which are very concentrated in specific parts of the country, which will not be named now, but in specific parts of the country with a very specific culture. So the industry tend to take on that kind of culture. Now, we don't see that in the citrus industry because we are spread right around the country with our biggest production areas in Lesotho and in the Sundays River Valley, but then further spread very, very, very well around the country. So we see a lot of influences, a lot of different ways of thinking and approaching issues from all of these various cultures. So it's a really, really great industry to work in.
So on that note, is the Citrus Academy in South Africa, is there anything like this anywhere else in the world?
I am not aware. Not that we've seen. It is actually very rare for an industry organization to have a dedicated organization that only looks at skills development. It is often it can be outsourced. Some industries, even in South Africa, some of the other agricultural industries would outsource that kind of work to specific organizations so they work very closely with them. But it doesn't belong to the industry as such. It is actually very rare that you see this sort of thing. And what it has allowed the industry to do is to build up a large volume of intellectual property and a large volume of resources and industry knowledge that has been documented and has been put out there and has been made available, so that access to the industry and access to knowledge about the industry and about production and about all aspects of the value chain is very accessible. It's also very easy to see what is there already and where we need to go and add. So a lot of the work is also then around just looking at what is known, at curating the knowledge base within the industry, which I think is a very important function. It also, of course, democratizes knowledge. It's not sitting with particular people. It's not being kept away. It makes it open. It makes it available to everybody, which is allowed, I would believe, to contribute at least to the growth in the industry.
So, Jacomien, I want to take you back to that, what you were talking about, walking into Justin's office and saying, so where do we start? But you did start, and you have done incredible things. And, you were inventing it as you went along because there was nothing that you could copy. So the Citrus Academy is phenomenal, what you guys have done and what you've achieved. And maybe it would be good if you give us some stats of how many people have been helped with bursaries and, some examples of where they are today. Just give us a bit of context.
Now, there's an interesting question. So, but part of the work that we do. So we established when we started the Academy in 2005, there were a few bursaries at that time that were being funded by the Citrus Industry Trust for a few students here and there. And one of the first things we did is we took over the administration of the bursaries from the Citrus Industry Trust. We established the Citrus Academy Bursary Fund at the beginning of 2006. So it's a very mature bursary fund by now. That's now been going for almost 18 years. Funded by the Citrus Industry Trust, by Agri-Future, by companies within the industry. So to date, including this year, we've awarded about 1,100 bursaries through the Academy's Bursary Fund. About 350 beneficiaries. That's benefited from Citrus Academy bursaries. About 60 of them are still studying this year. So about 290 graduates that's come and gone through the bursary fund. About 23 million rand that's been invested in bursaries over that time.
Wow.
Where are they now? Well, that's a very interesting question.
Sorry?
No, that's sorry, I thought you were going to ask a question.
No, okay, so it's been a long run, a lot of effort, a lot of helping students who get stuck with problems that you have to assist them with. I mean, I know a little bit about that. But having shepherded many of them and helped them and been inspired by them as well, getting them through their studies, it's creating incredible capacity in the citrus industry. And I know sometimes people move beyond the citrus industry. So if you look at the body of capacity that you've created, there must be some shining stars, and there must be some people that cross the room to come and say hello to you after many years when you see them at a conference. And what has been your experience?
Yes, I'm very glad to say that this is still true, that people do remember their time being on the Citrus Academy Bursary Fund fondly in many cases. Yes, we've had such diverse experiences. We are actually at the moment doing a survey amongst Citrus Academy graduates to look at their career progression since they were on the bursary fund, and how they progressed, where they are now. But asking some very interesting questions, like what are the best or the qualifications with the really high return on investment, that we can really say that these this particular qualification or that specific qualifications from that specific academic institution has got very good return on investment. If we want to go and take a cold hard look at it, the human side, of course, is always more interesting.
Yes.
And there's been tremendous stories in the bursary fund. I've been doing a bit of between Candace, our bursary fund manager, and me, we've been doing a bit of digging and a bit of sleuthing to get into contact again with some of our bursary fund graduates that we've not, especially from the early days. Many of them we still have contact with. About 2/3 of the learners that had graduated up till now, graduates from the bursary fund, are still working within the citrus industry. So, a lot of people we see very often. There's a significant number of people who work for the CRI now that works within the industry organizations. There's people who work in academia who lecture at universities, associate professors at universities, people who do research there. We've got a few students who are doing postgraduate work or actually postdoctoral work in Canada and at other universities where they've received scholarships to go and study there. This, of course, is a credit to the quality of research also that's done in the industry in South Africa, that's done by the CRI in South Africa. And we are very lucky to be so closely associated with the CRI, and have and a lot of our postgraduate bursaries then are to students that work very closely with the CRI. So we've got so many good stories. I've also just through our sleuthing now, people who have established their own companies, people who have and doing very, very interesting work. People who are COOs of food companies, food services companies that operate throughout Southern Africa. People who are involved in government, who have got quite high positions in government departments, from the DTI to the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, to, of course, the Department of Agriculture, to provincial departments of agriculture. Very, very exciting. And then, of course, as I said, people who are directly involved in the industry, growers and packhouse managers, and people who have progressed so well. We are very excited about the outcomes of the career survey. Maybe we can have a follow-up podcast in about 2 or 3 months when we have those results and we've had a time to assimilate that, because I think that there will be really, really interesting trends that we can identify from that.
I think it would be incredible. And, I walked the path a little bit with the Citrus Academy right at the beginning. And I remember doing interviews with some of those young people that were really just starting out, and, they were teetering between despair and stars in their eyes. And it would be very interesting to go and see where they are today and how they are today, and how take
those old articles.
Yes. Yes. Well, anyway, we could go there, but It's just exciting. The passion of where they started and where they are today, and reflecting on that, and that the Citrus Academy made it possible for them. And so many times, when you donate to something like the growers or whoever's donating towards the fund, you give your money, but you don't know where it's going and you don't know who it's making a difference to. I think it could be very cool to go back to these people and say, look what you've done.
Yeah.
That I think is exciting. And that you've been there throughout this, and your team, your very committed, hardworking team has put this together. And you had no group blueprint to work from. You've just made it up as you've gone along, and look where you've gotten to. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. As I say, very lucky to be in the industry that we are. The attitude that the citrus industry take towards addressing specific matters that they would want to look at has always been extremely innovative. Has always been demand led. What are we looking to achieve here? What are we looking to solve? What problems are we looking to solve? What challenges are we looking to help growers to address? And I think that's so important. It is an incredibly sophisticated industry in that regard. When we started at the academy, how do you go about climbing that mountain? How do you go about, chopping up that elephant into bite sizes, especially if it keeps growing all the time? Well, exactly that. You go and look at what are the immediate challenges. Where are we? And you start looking at a multi-pronged approach, because the industry is so export oriented. I think people often don't realize in South Africa exactly what the scope of the citrus industry is. The industry is very much export oriented. So also because I think for that reason, people are not, you only see so much citrus, of course this time of the year loads of it, but you only see so much citrus on the shelves, and you don't see it all year round. It's not like apples. People tend to think that apples is a much bigger industry than citrus because you see it all year round and there's just so much of it. But the fact is citrus is much bigger, and citrus is very much export oriented. So we export around between 70 and 75% of the citrus that we produce in South Africa is exported fresh to about 65 countries around the world. That generates about 95% of the income for the industry. And that is then very important. That is the main focus of the industry is to keep exports working. The citrus industry earns, in terms of foreign currency, it is the highest earner in agriculture. It earns more foreign currency than wine, than sugar, than maize, than any other agricultural product. It earns more foreign currency than all the other fruit types put together. So this is deciduous fruit, apples, pears, table grapes, all the other fruit types put together. The citrus industry in itself earns more foreign currency than those industries. And for this reason, the value chain is extremely sophisticated and extremely extensive. So if you look from nurseries and also very regulated, because you have to, we often say, we work from the industry organization point of view. We serve the growers. That's our main focus. We serve the growers and whatever relates to the growers, whatever assists the growers, whatever the growers need to get done. The growers will tell you that they serve their overseas customer. That's what they do. They look to meet the needs and meet the demands of their overseas customer. They don't look to meet the demands of the shipping company or the export agent or the backhouse or the whoever else is sitting in the value chain. They focus on their overseas customer, and that is who they serve. Everything is geared towards the needs of that customer to get the best possible quality fruit at the best possible price and in the shortest possible time to that overseas customer's plate, into that overseas customer's basket. That is what the industry is aimed at. And to make that happen involves an incredibly interesting and sophisticated value chain. So if we want to serve the grower, we need to look at the entire value chain. We need to say, in this value chain, how do we make sure that we do everything we can from the Citrus Academy side to make sure that the value chain operates as well as it possibly can. Starting, of course, with the nursery, going to the grower, looking at research, looking at packhouses, looking then at logistics, at export agents, at freight forwarding, at everything that we need to do to make sure that the value chain operates as well as it can be. The supplier and stakeholder development side of that is always very interesting, from, as I said, exporters, logistics, and so on. But then you start looking at government departments. How do we support government departments to make sure that they provide services, optimal services to the industry, to make sure that the industry can do optimal work? How do you support the Department of Agriculture? We are this year working on an extension officer training program to ensure that we are able to provide the best possible or to develop extension officers with real knowledge and real understanding of what happens on citrus farms, to make sure that they are locked into the research networks, into the knowledge and extension networks within the industry. We work with all the CJ at least works very closely with the people at the National Ports Authority, at Transnet, to make sure that the services that they provide to the industry is optimized. Working very closely together with the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform, Rural Development, to make sure that they've got all the information that they need, they've got all the assistance that they need when it comes to things like market access, negotiating new trade agreements, and so forth. So it is an extremely interesting industry and complex value chain to be involved in. And if you then establish something like an academy, you're always going to start with primary production. You're always going to start with the growers, So if I say that about half the work that we do has got to do with the Citrus Academy Bursary Fund, the Bursary Fund we see as a very handy pipeline to bring new people and new skills into the industry. So we will always maintain that, and we will always optimize that. We will also do a lot of work in promoting the industry, promoting the bursary fund, promoting careers in agriculture wherever we get a chance. We work with the department, with the Agri-Future, with all the universities in South Africa. We speak at schools, we do whatever, wherever we get a platform. Somebody gives me space to put my soapbox down, we're there. And we talk to about the industry and about what wonderful career opportunities there are. So that pipeline, we will always do what we have to keep feeding the pipeline and to optimize that pipeline to get new skills and fresh people into the industry. On the other hand, then, we look at skills development within the industry, at workplace skills development. So we, as I said, always started with the growers. You start with primary production, because how do you make sure that people on farms and in packhouses and in primary production has got the knowledge, the tools, so on, that they have to learn more, to stay up to date, to teach their workers, to do the training that they need in order to optimize what they do. Then you go and look at packhouses, you do the same there. And then you go and look at stakeholder development, and you look at other levels, and you take a multi-pronged approach, because you've got way different target groups, from workers to managers to people who are involved in agrochemical suppliers, and so on. And you have to make sure that all those people, to extension officers, quite frankly, and you have to make sure that all of those people have got the kind of learning available to them that is most suited to their circumstances and most suited to them. Accessibility, how long it takes to do a particular program, how quickly it is that you can find out that you want. You don't want to go and study a PhD in agriculture to find out how to plant a tree. You just want to learn how to plant a tree. So you need to have an extremely flexible system, and you also need to be multi-pronged in order to be able to do that, and to really look at what that value chain looks like, and how do we address the needs of everybody within that value chain.
So a question from my side is, if I listen to this, because we know a lot about this, so it makes sense to us. But if you give this like everything, let's say a possible student, matric student is listening to this now, what do they do? What they could be interested in this, but they might think, oh hell, this is a lot. Where do I start? What do I do? What can I expect going into this? So what does that process look like? What is it? What can a pupil expect that wants to go through the Citrus Academy, or do you need to have, I don't know.
How does the process work?
Yeah, and what can they expect from somebody with if they've got no experience in this industry at all?
I think this sounds like something that I might like to do. And it's always, of course, better, the first step is go and do a bit of homework, go and do a little bit of work to understand better what the industry entails. So I've shared quite a bit about that. But on our website, there's quite a bit of information about the industry and about career opportunities and so on in the industry. And then, of course, the question would be, what would you like to do? You know, where do you want to go to be? Do you want to learn how to drive a tractor one of these days using an iPad, standing by the side of a field, apparently? Do you want to be involved in production? Do you want to be involved in research? Where are your interests? Are you going towards the engineering side? Would you like to be more involved in the packhouse side, in logistics and marketing? You know, where are your interests? What is it that you would like to do? And then, of course, the question is, what do you need to go and study? What do you need to go and do in order for you to realize that and to get into that? So yeah, that's always an interesting question, Dewald. You know, how do you do? I mean, how did we get into what we got into? That is why it's so important to do career advice at schools, and for us to do whatever we can to be at career fairs, to be at career days at schools, to be represented there, to make sure that people are exposed to the industry, that they have a reasonable understanding of what the options are. So what the learning, the different ways of learning about it is, you know, from practical experience to full-time studies to studying short courses and so on, and what that all will entail, and where that can bring them, where that can take them.
And for instance, like I know you said it, or like the industry body's got to spend 20% on empowerment and upliftment and all that. Is this only open to previously disadvantaged students, or can somebody from Bishops or one of the big schools also apply for this?
Yeah, the Citrus Academy Bursary Fund is not exclusive. Nothing of what we do is exclusive. We have about 77%. Actually, pretty much the if you go and look at the demographic split in the country, the population demographic split in the country, we pretty much in line with that in terms of our support and so on. So some of our programs are aimed at that, specifically then programs that we give very direct support to emergent growers, for instance, meeting all their skills development needs. So if they need, particular training, we see that it gets done, see to it that it gets done. We provide, then we've got a special category of bursaries where we provide very direct support to emergent growers, their families, people who work for them, and so on. So those things are pretty, 100% support to previously disadvantaged individuals. But the rest of the academy services are open. The bursary fund is about 78% of the beneficiaries of the bursary fund are PDIs. The rest are not. So it is very equally spread. We're not exclusive in any way. We actually, know that demographics wise, we actually probably have about 55% female beneficiaries as opposed to males, which is a little bit out of line with the demographic, which is always quite interesting. On the bursary fund, for instance, we've got certain criteria, weighted criteria that we use when we do selections, when we do approvals for the bursary fund. And a few years ago, we actually removed the weighting from the gender category criteria on the bursary fund. And we still have more women benefiting from bursaries than men. So that's quite interesting. In agriculture, you often don't see that. You don't often see that many. But it is because also, probably only about 20% of our bursaries are for primary production. The rest are all for research, for logistics, for engineering, and so on. So it's always interesting to see how diverse the industry actually is and actually naturally falls into being.
But from our experience going around now, a lot of the people that's really making waves is girls.
Young women. Yeah.
Young women in that, and I have found working with some of them, they know what they want and they are not scared of the men. So it's really refreshing to see. And we've been to some of these open days, and then you are there, and it's like you say, there will be more than half of it will be girls or women that's there at these open days and grower days and things like that, which is very cool to see.
A lot of progress in the industry, and I think in agriculture specifically, I'm obviously much more familiar with the citrus industry itself. There's been so much progress in the citrus industry since I joined, which is, as we said, many, many years ago. But when Paul Creer was still playing for Pirates, but there has been so much development, and there's so much that can be said for just opening an industry up and no longer focusing on things that are in the end pretty irrelevant. What the color of your skin and your gender is in the end not really relevant. What is relevant is, can you do the job? How good are you at communicating and doing the job? At how driven are you? How willing are you to learn, to step up, to do the hard work, to do the hard miles? That in the end is what counts and what should count.
Yes,
for sure. And your description of the citrus industry and the incredibly long and complicated supply chain also means that anybody wanting to join the citrus industry, there's an incredibly diverse choice of careers that you can go into. It's not like a simpler industry, which I can't think of an example now, but it's complex. There are so many opportunities. And, you can be an accountant, you can be an engineer, you can be primary agriculture, you can be a researcher. There's just so much to choose from. And I would imagine that creating capacity within all those fields, or with many of them, has been, if you step back, I know you're very involved, and it's always difficult when you're so close to the wheel, but if you could take 2 steps back and look and see the capacity that has been created through the Citrus Academy, it's phenomenal, actually.
Yeah. No, it has. It is, and I think we've also been lucky in that we've managed by staying close to the industry and really paying attention to what's happening in the industry and the way things are going. To stay a little bit ahead of the curve. It's not true in all cases. Sometimes we are blindsided by new skills needs. For instance, all of a sudden, we've seen the last year, really just the last year, we've seen a tremendous demand for things like people who can code. That is one of the highest demand jobs in South Africa, actually, is people who can program, people who can code, because so much of there are many production practices and planning practices and so on that's going towards a more technological approach. If you take from things like irrigation scheduling to things like land use planning to things like soil analysis, all of these things are just getting more and more technological, and the need for people who really can specialize in IT and really can do that kind of work has just increased tremendously. So much of in agriculture, in the processes in agriculture, again, I look at when I started and I look at now, and you just realize that it has become so much more sophisticated in terms of approaching so many systems, approaching so many processes now as a system. It's no longer seen as a series of distinct tasks. It's not, we are now going to, if you take one example, we are now going to manage phytosanitary, pest, for instance, pest insect. The approach that we take, we're not, it's not separate processes of let's spray that and let's trap here and let's do inspections there. It is one system that is integrated and where all of these parts work together. And if you are not able to understand and work within systems, if you can't think in terms of systems, then you will find it very difficult in many instances to fit into that kind of sophistication. It really is. No longer, there is very little in agriculture that is unsophisticated these days. That is still just, the guy sitting on his farm with his little bicycle, and that just isn't there anymore. If you are in a competitive export-driven industry, the way you have to operate on a much higher level than that. So we see the levels, the skills needs, the skills requirements, the approaches, the way that people are learning and the way that people are processing information, that they're executing tasks, getting more and more sophisticated as well. So we also work very closely with academic institutions, looking at how can we help them, how can we help students while they're still at university to get exposure, to understand better what the workplace will require from them. It is a bit of a heavy lift, universities, that there's a misalignment of incentives when it comes to post-school education in South Africa, when it comes to academic institutions. This is true all over the world. That is simply one of the realities that one learns to live with in education, is that post-school education institutions, universities, colleges, all of them are incentivized to produce postgraduates. Not colleges so much, because they only go up to an advanced diploma level, but especially universities are incentivized to get people to stay there as long as they possibly can.
Yeah.
So for them to do postgraduate work and for people to stay as long as they possibly can. We've always said that the purpose of the bursary fund is not, the aim of the bursary fund is not to graduate people, is not to produce people, is not to produce certificates. We don't produce paper. What we do is we assist people to take the first step on establishing a long and happy and successful and productive career in the industry, in the citrus industry. So whatever you do while you're taking this first step, which for many might feel like a giant leap, but it is still only the first step that you take. While you are doing that, everything that you do must be, or everything, but you really do need to keep in mind, and you need to focus on, what am I going to do? How does this lead me to have a career, to have a happy career? And that is where universities do well to look at how they deliver certain kinds of learning. We can't be doing with at colleges or universities, be doing with teaching people how to do monitoring of soil moisture content with the evaporation pans that people used in the 60s anymore.
Yeah.
It's just not the way that it's done in practice now. Nobody can afford to be doing that anymore. And that's just one example, So to stay up to date with what are the current practices, how do we make this, how do we optimize this, how do we make sure that people come out of university and out of post-school education with a solid understanding and with the skills that they need in order to cope in the workplace is a challenge, and we assist wherever we can with that to make sure that students are able to cope better and to fit into the workplace better.
So with what's it now, 18 and a half years, the general young person out there is almost generation, it's now Generation Z, so Gen Z, and everybody can be what they want and do what they want. How did that change for you guys? How did you deal with that change in the type of student that comes in, or is it not really an issue with you guys? I'm just curious because everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about the children that want to work, that kind of scenario from the older generation. So can you say something about that if you've got any experience?
Yeah, I actually think that it's a bit of a misconception that, to say that, okay, I allow for the fact that there are certain people of a particular generation that stay stuck in their ways, that, you have, I'm what am I?
Gen X.
I can't even remember, Gen X, I think
Gen
we
X.
were. Yeah. So, but and at the time, it's entirely possible. I agree with the fact that when I was in my early 20s and wearing Madonna cut off, little gloves, when I was a youngster with massive wild hair in the 80s and early 90s, I absolutely. I'm happy with the idea that at that point I was in a certain way that was very specifically Gen X. But I think that I'd like to think at least that the world moves on, and that in so many ways young people set the tone and I think that that's maybe also become more and more true as we've moved on. One of the things that they always said about millennials and going into Gen Z a little bit as well is that they don't want to just work. They want to have meaning. They want to understand what's the meaning of what I do. What is, how does this matter? And of course, they want to make sure that there's space for their needs to be met, and that they, and a lot of Gen Xers get quite impatient with that because, this is not about you. It's about what you can do. It's not about what I can do for you. It's about what you can do for me, sort of thing. But I also think that the world has changed in a way that it has become in many ways more about meaning. I think that's something that is sort of soaked through the workplace now, that so many more people are now concerned with what is actually the meaning of what I do. How does this actually go further? And it's of course very nice if you're in agriculture to take that kind of approach to be allowed to say, this is actually, apart from the fact that it is a really fun job to do, it's also really meaningful. It's also, we actually all contribute to making food, to putting food on the table. Every time you eat, every time you wear something, every time you can hardly wear something or eat anything, well, definitely not eat anything or drink anything these days without it requiring somebody to be on a farm somewhere. Yep. So to be involved in that, to be part of that industry is truly meaningful. It's fundamentally meaningful, apart from all the other meaning that you get along the way. I don't know how agrochemical suppliers feel about that, but they are definitely also part of that value chain, part of putting food on the table, and that so much more of it has also gone, is now more focused on sustainable development and on sustainable farming practices, and on how do we make this user friendly? How do we optimize this so that it will be there many years to come still? So just more specifically then maybe to your question is, okay, so what do we see? It is, of course, very interesting when you start going back like we are now to some of the students that were on the bursary fund first. And first time we met them, like you were also saying, Louise, the first time we met them, they were 19 and 20 years old. And now you see them and they're married and they have kids and they've, established careers and they're going on and they're playing golf on a Friday afternoon, and so it is quite something to see how people have grown up, and you sitting there with them complaining about the youngsters, of today. So, well, I never complain, but they do. Because I think it's one of the things, because we work with young people all the time, with the bursary fund students all the time, it also in a way keeps us young, and it keeps us in touch with that generational shift of how people approach their work differently. And again, we're not there to bring youngsters up or to change or to change hearts and minds. We're there to help them to achieve a career, to get into the industry and to achieve a career as easily and as painlessly as they can and as successfully as they possibly can. I'm nobody's mother, I'm nobody's best friend, I'm nobody's counselor. What I am is the person who can help you and assist you and guide you and advise you on how to deal with certain things that you'll encounter in the workplace and in the industry. And if specific attitudes that from your generation that you feel you have because of the generation that you are in don't work with that, well, then you need to be, I will not then be shy of pointing out to you that your particular attitudes are making this more difficult for you, and that you need to choose whether you want to stay with that attitude or whether you would like to progress and go further. The world is never going to adjust to suit anybody else. Unfortunately, the world is what the world is, and we all get to adjust to that, and we all get to live in that. It's true for all of us, always been true for all of us. And I think that there are a few young people who find that difficult to see. But I also think that the reality of the workplace and the reality of being in the industry and their desire to be part of the industry and to be part of a workplace and to forge careers, if that is strong enough, these things don't really, in the end, cannot be overcome with a bit of willingness.
And in terms of advice from somebody that works with these young people, how should the older generation treat them? What should the older generation put in place or do to make it easier for them to get into the industry and to make a success from it? If there's something that we could, because everybody's complaining, but maybe they should change their attitude as well.
Yeah. Specifically around workplaces then, and older people in workplaces, yes. Yeah, unfortunately, human resource management and workplace coaching and so on in the industry has never been one of what one would call a particularly strong area of performance within agriculture. I think it's fair to say, and I think that there is an opportunity for people to think long and hard about what it is that they're trying to achieve. What is it that to now and again stand still and say, what am I doing here? What am I trying to do here? What am I aiming to achieve here? Am I aiming to just enforce my own will, to just force down my own will and just to get my own way, whether that's actually in the end productive or not? Or am I looking to make this work, get everybody pulling in the same direction, get everybody working together, and do the best that I can in terms of what is the optimal outcome for the workplace, for my company, for my job, and so on and so on. And it's often difficult because I think that that just on a social on a human scale in South Africa, and the social dynamics within South Africa, within South African communities, with how things shift over time, is that it is easy for some groups of people, and in particular here, I think of white men. I think white men, around the world, if you look at some of the other countries like America, where it is apparently now just about the most sinful thing you can be in the world is a white man. That is just some really, really, I think, worrying cultural developments around how people are identity politics, and how particular people are being seen and being cast, which is purely racist and purely discriminatory, which is not based on any kind of reality on a one-to-one basis. So I think on those kinds of social dynamics, there are many, I think, men, white men in particular, who are finding it quite difficult to deal with the world, and are feeling slightly under threat. And I think especially older white men. And there are of course political issues there. There are very specific policies and so on being put in place, such as employment equity policies and BEE policies and so on, which means that that there is a certain feeling of threat towards particular people. And I think every person has to deal in their own mind, has to deal with what does that mean? How do I just allow this to run riot in my psyche and impact on whatever it impacts? For that ping pong ball to hit whatever barriers it hits and do whatever damage it does. So if it's in the workplace and I allow this anxiety, this fundamental anxiety to impact on the way that I manage people and the way that I supervise and coach people. Do I allow that to happen, or do I put some real thinking into what is happening here? Where am I? What am I trying to achieve here? What is the outcomes that I'm looking to achieve? And can I just set aside my other concerns and these concerns about my position in the world? A lot of these things are reality, but like most reality, it's how you approach it. Now you see it, now you use it. Where you can look at certain statistics and figures and forecasts about the future of South Africa, and you can put your head under the pillow, crawl under the carpet, and start listening to Leonard Cohen and Quest du Plessis songs, and just sink into the floor. Or you can take that and say, wow, that's great. Okay, what can we do with this? How can we take it forward? At least it's not in the minuses, or at least it's not nothing. Or, you can say, where are the opportunities? If I look at these forecasts, these stats, where are the opportunities here that we can go and improve things, make it better? And neither of those ways are wrong or, inappropriate. The one is just constructive and the other one is not constructive. The one will get you somewhere and the other one will not get you somewhere, except for under the carpet. But, it won't get you anywhere. It won't make you a better operator, a better business person, a better supervisor, a better leader, a better boss, a better person to work with, a better person to be married to, have as a parent, operate in the world and operate within your community. So I think that there's a lot of introspection and a lot of work that people need to do. I'm sorry, we're really getting into the
Interesting. That's exactly what we wanted. But a lot of what you say, talking about looking forward, looking into the future. And so let's go there. What if you look down the road for the Citrus Academy into the future? It's very well established. You guys have done an amazing job of establishing it. What's the next thing? What are you looking at into the future for the Citrus Academy?
Yeah, every time I think of, okay, yeah, we're good now. We've got what we need. The industry is well. Then, things start changing again, or, you start looking at the next thing, and you start looking at things a little bit differently again. And yeah, there's always new things, always new work to be done. The industry is in a very strong growth phase at the moment. It's well, they're not planting anymore. In the sort of last 5 years or so, I'd say probably up until about 2021, there was tremendous growth and new development and new plantings within the industry, to the point where last year we exported about 160, just under 165 million cartons from South Africa. This year, the forecasts are pretty much the same as it was last year. Mostly because last year was quite quite a tough year for many people who exported citrus from South Africa. There were many challenges around logistics. There were many challenges around the overseas markets. You will know about the issues around phytosanitary access to EU and all of that. So all of that happened in 1 year. So a bit of a perfect storm. I won't say of what color and smell that storm was, but it was a bit of a perfect storm last year, and a lot of people had a really tough time last year. So this year, people are being quite conservative with what they're exporting. They are redirecting a lot of fruit onto the local market, although the production, of course, is still really good. According to the projections, though, still, we are projecting that by 2032, we will be exporting around 260 million cartons from South Africa. So from now till 2022, we project that exports will grow by about 100 million cartons, which is a scary
it's
number.
It's staggering, actually, the number.
It's a scary number. If you just look at the number, that's a very scary number. But the CGA and the citrus industry, being what they are, and taking the attitude that they take towards things, are not being daunted. They looked at this daunting number, took a deep breath, had an extra cup of coffee and an extra cup of tea, maybe a little bit augmented, and then they said to each other, what can we do about this? How do we we can all sit here and wait for the tsunami, or we can start building really big towers, and we can start building really big ships. So they said, what can we do about this? And they put in place a initiative that they call Vision 260, and they are now in the process of speaking to everybody involved in the industry, all the stakeholders, all the suppliers to the industry, making them aware of what's coming, making sure that they know of the growth curves that we're looking at, making sure that they've got detailed information about that, and making sure that they're prepared. So everybody from agrochemical companies to export agents to logistics companies to shipping agents to of course export agents, markets, making sure that everybody is aware of what's coming, and developing new markets and working hard to make sure that we'll have somewhere to send this fruit. So there's a lot of happening around that. And for the Citrus Academy to make sure that we stay with that curve, that we are in a position to ensure that the skills are in place, that the people are there, that the supply of skills into the industry, and that the skills pools in the citrus production regions are growing, and that they are there, and that people are growers will have the people and the skills that they need in order to realize this growth. That is our main purpose and our main focus. So that's very exciting at this point. That's a big, and then to make sure that the growth is also equitable, that there's a lot of support for emergent growers, that they have everything that they need, that the skills, that whatever skills needs they have are immediately addressed, that those are, and that they get, that the support that they get from government extension and so forth is really of a very high quality. That is something that we are strongly focused on now. So we don't really see anything, big changes in direction for the academy. What we do, I think, works well, but continuously adding to programs and adding to and adjusting the way that we do things and making sure that we're aware of all new needs, that they are being addressed. If they're not being addressed by what is in place, then we need to go and see what role we can play. The other on the skills development landscape, there's been this long incoming change from old style qualifications, what they call historical qualifications, to occupational qualifications, which is just a whole new approach to how full qualifications in the workplace is done and delivered and facilitated. So that's all happening. So we're working closely with Fruit SA, or within Fruit SA, with the other fruit industries to develop that and to make sure that the industry is on a good wicket there, and we have everything that we need. So there's always something new. I don't think massive changes in direction, but always something new, always something. The other exciting development is that the CGA has now also been joined by the growers from Botswana and from Namibia. So traditionally the CGA
and Zimbabwe,
as its members, had the growers in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Eswatini, even though, of course, transformation is not in Zimbabwe and Eswatini isn't a priority area, we do assist them with skills development services and with making things available to them. But Botswana, for instance, is a very new industry. But big plantings happening there now, big new developments. So that industry is really on a very fast track at the moment. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of training and development and so on. So that's always exciting. That's always interesting to see how you assist and establish that that a new industry like that, and assist them to get established as well as possible. So that's all also very interesting, just in terms of developments within the industry.
Oh, fantastic!
Okay, well, that's incredibly interesting. We have a closing tradition, and that is that we have the previous guest gives us a question for the next guest, and it's completely random, and it's fun, and so your question is over to you, Dewald.
Okay. And it's actually very fitting in what we've been chatting about is how can we use technology or AI to solve some of the biggest problems, be it in the world or in this industry? You can answer it either way.
Very broad question.
Yeah.
Whatever, there isn't your answer is the best answer.
but I think it comes at a very good time, because it is on the lips of every single person at the moment is AI.
I guess the first question is, how do we keep it from destroying us all?
Yes,
do. I think that's the first question on the lips of many people at the moment. Yes, it's interesting times, right?
Yes.
I think the first time my mother saw a television remote control was when she was about the age that I am now. So,
Yes.
If I take the same rate of change, and it's not the same rate of change, it's accelerating much faster now, the rate of development and change, than it was in her lifetime. In my lifetime, it will develop a lot faster. One wonders where we'll be at in when I'm 85, like my mother is now. That will be a very interesting thing to say. How can we use it to solve problems? I think the biggest contribution that we're seeing already developing in agriculture and because especially in export oriented industries like ours, is managing big data, is gathering, scouring, cleaning up, and then analyzing and using big data to optimize and to improve and to optimize what we do, and to understand better how things work and how things happen in the industry, especially in the export value chain. So I think big data is a very interesting development. The other interesting development that I think, and I hope that more and more of this will realize over the next few years, is to use AI to really get on a much more allow us to develop a much better understanding of the impact that farming has on the environment. There are so many opinions of it out there, which I think are almost all uninformed, mostly because there's nothing to inform them. There's just no solid information and data out there really to inform them. So, what are you informing your opinion with? There are, of course, people who really do know what they're talking about, people who make a study of this. But the other day I was watching an event, and somebody reporting on the impact of farming on the environment based on a survey that they did amongst consumers. So they were basing their opinion on what their view of how farming impacts the environment on the opinion of consumers on how farming impacts the environment. So that really is that's not even the tail wagging the dog. That's more like the ball, I don't know. It
just doesn't make any sense.
The ball hitting the racket for an ace, it's just really does not make much sense at all. So I'm hoping that's another contribution that we can, because it is such a massive amount of data to take into account. If you start looking at environmental impact, the climate impact, impact on the soil, on the water sources, on the fruit itself, on trees itself, on if you take from biodiversity to application of agrochemicals, to all of these things, that is such an enormous amount of information that needs to be gathered there, and that needs to be analyzed, sorted, and better understood. There's so many things that people think that they need to do in order to address the environmental impact of farming. Unfortunately, people come up with ideas like, let's grow organic. That is probably the worst thing you can do, because all you're doing is using the same amount of resources, soil, water, etc., to produce 20% less fruit, 20% less food. So it is an environmental disaster to want to grow organic. Yes, maybe you are using slightly less harmful agrochemicals in organic farming, but the compromise in the volume production has got a much bigger impact on anything than anything else. So I don't know. That is a whole other topic for conversation, which I also have a whole load of uninformed opinions about that I'm very happy to share. But I think that even the person in the bus might get hot under their seat.
But the interesting thing
talking about that.
The interesting thing is that the other day I found something on LinkedIn. It was a group of professors from Stellenbosch who did a study on the impact of refrigeration in
cold storage of fruit
in fresh produce, particularly. And there was a 22-page study that they've put out, and I can't read that. It's the higher level stuff. I copied the whole thing into ChatGPT, and it summarized it for me in 600 words, so that I've got a very good understanding of what it's about. That's all that you need.
Yes.
What does this thing say? And I think for the general public out there to get those kind of data, just so that they can understand it as well, I think it's. But then in the practical scheme of, you can run pumps. There's been pumps out there that some of our clients, the trees tell the pumps when they need water, and it's all run through AI, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
Brave. Yeah, so that's very exciting.
Yeah.
But thank you very, very much. It's been incredibly interesting. And I think that the Citrus Academy is an inspiration, and you and your team have done incredible things. And let's continue the conversation at another time. Yeah. Thanks, Jacomien.
Don't log off yet. We need your question.
Thank you so much.
Stick around.
Thank you.